This is Pam Electric Ghost Live with Jeremy Haselwood. You're a two-time best-selling author, and this is the first time on the Pam Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, we've got your link to Amazon, where I guess that's where you can find your book, and
Correct. Yeah.
we're going to be talking about your path as an author and
Okay.
your story. But
Cool.
before we get into that, we usually ask every guest on the show a couple questions. First question is, what motivates you, and why do you do what you do?
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing. Like I feel like I'm a messenger of hope. So motivation for me is seeing change occur in interactions that I have with people, providing hope to people, and just seeing like a physical change, through a conversation, through a dialogue, or maybe after the fact, planting a seed and getting that email maybe a month or a year later of someone saying that you said something or did something and that really made a difference to me. Like that is fuel for me.
When did you find that you wanted to be an author or a storyteller? Is that something you always wanted to do?
I think I guess the short answer is no. But I think the seed was planted back in maybe like high school when I started writing poetry and starting getting into music, and ultimately began like performing. And a friend of mine had a music group. I'm from Oklahoma, and we ended up
Mhm.
moving to Atlanta, and we were a hip hop group. So kind of a rarity in Oklahoma, period. So which by the way, like that's why I love your show, because I know you dabble in the arts and music and all kinds of stuff. So I already know this is going to be a great session today. So I moved, and we can get more into this story later, but ultimately the music didn't pan out, after going
Mhm.
several years in Atlanta and having some mild successes here and there. But I think just that feeling of performing and moving a room and the energy, that kind of transitioned. When I transitioned out of music, it transitioned into something else eventually, not off the bat. It was just like, what do I do now? And I had a story to tell, and I had a journey that I'd lived, and I wanted to write about it and share with other people some different tips to help them in life.
I've always found like the creative spark. Like I talked to a lot of creative people, as you noted.
Yeah.
We started with singer songwriters back in 2016, and we've kind of
Hmm.
evolved to talking to everybody who's a
Yeah.
creative, has a creative kind of spark.
Yep.
I always find that, like, some people don't give themselves permission to be
Hmm.
creative.
Yeah.
They seem like you are already doing, one type of creativity with like
Yeah.
music, and then you transition. Did you ever have like doubts about being creative, or like, did you feel like you weren't? Because a lot of people is that are in the comparison trap. They're like,
Yeah.
well, I can't. I knew a lot of kids like, well, if I can't play like Jimmy Page,
Right.
or if I
Right.
can't play like Hendrix, then I have no right to play. And I'm like,
Yeah.
why not? Why can't you play? You could still say something.
Yeah. No, for me, I think the biggest hurdle for me to get over was just at the very beginning. Like when I started writing poetry and like the first song or two that I made, I'm like, I think it's cool, but I don't know if other people will think it is. And I mean that is important to a degree, because yes, you can make music for yourself, but if you're going to try to make a living off of it, other
Mhm.
people need to like what you're doing as well. So, we let a couple people listen to it, actually friends in the neighborhood, and they loved what we did. So, like that right there, like I took the lever of how creative should I be, and I just went swoop, and I just went all in. So it got to a point where like I did everything. Like I produced the music, I arranged it, I mixed it. I didn't master it because I had someone to actually match the music, but creating the graphics for the album covers, kind of directing the photo shoots, like all of it. Like it's an orchestration of everything. So I'm like, I wanted to have a part in all of it. So I have zero regrets, man. Like when I look back, like I'm really proud of what I did. I didn't necessarily like every song that I did, but
Mm.
looking at the body of work that we did, and I know the time and effort and creativity that went into it. I mean, it's just like zero regrets, man. I will never look back and wish that I didn't do that or wish I could have done more.
Well, it's like the learning curve. Like when I talk to a lot of musicians, everybody knows, like if you're a musician, like
Hmm.
you have your demos, you
Hmm.
have all the things you do, and then you have what the public actually hears, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
it's like there's a lot of rungs on the ladder before you get
Hmm.
to like what you actually the listener gets, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize is like the process from A to Z, right? It's like
Hmm.
it's a learning like experience. It's a lesson learned from your first demo to where you get that song out on you're on stage. Like you're
Yeah.
always evolving, in my opinion. Like as an
Yeah.
artist, like you figure out you transition from one form to the next. Like you went from music to being an author, but it
Hmm.
seems like you wanted to control your vision. Like even in your
Yeah.
music. And an
Hmm.
author has an ultimate, they build worlds, they build the structure of what they're going to say. They,
Hmm.
you know, unless they're heavily edited,
Right.
yeah, like it's your voice. And it
Yeah.
seems like you wanted the world to hear your voice.
Yeah. Well, and even to kind of with what you're saying, like you create something and you learn, you iterate, but then when you perform it, because when you're first writing a song, you're not performing the song. You're writing it, you're recording it, and you're releasing it. But then when you start to perform it, you also learn like, oh, this actually works in a performance, or this
Works better.
interaction with the crowd works. And then you take that back to the studio and you're interjecting different things and how you say words and phrases or what you're incorporating into your chorus, and you just get better each time. So like with me, like we never signed to a major label, and that's like that was the goal. But I also
Mm,
look back and I'm like, if we had signed to a major label, there, I mean, I possibly could have made a lot more money. It's not a guarantee that you do because so many
mm,
artists get signed to major labels and never put out an album, you know. But it's like if I put out an album, I could have made good money, possibly. But I did everything exactly how I wanted to do it, you know, and no one
mhm,
could say, no, we're not putting this out, or maybe you should do this instead. I mean, we had like a, you know, team of people that we work with. It's not like it was a dictatorship, but you know, we just had that creative control. And when it came to putting out my book, I mean, followed a very similar model. It's like I wanted to put out my words. Like I didn't use a ghostwriter. I everything comes from me. Every word on that page is my word. I had an editor that I worked with, and
mhm.
proofreader and all that, but even down to like how I wanted the cover to look and how I'm marketing it. Cause like by trade, I'm a marketing consultant. So, and
Yeah.
all
So
that
you
stuff I
have your hands
learned
in
from
that.
the music industry. Yeah. So it's like everything that I'm doing now is like the culmination of my life to this point.
Well, that's really like I think the whole point, like when you're creative, is like everything you learn, like you
Hmm.
bring to the table. Like
Yeah.
you said, like a live performance is like a real key, you
Hmm.
know, in musicianship. It's like because you figure out like what works. It's like I like
Right.
to write like
Yeah.
in my bedroom studio, but if
Hmm.
I when I go to play with a real drummer or I play with a
Yeah.
bass player, like my
Hmm.
song evolves. 'Cause I wrote the
Right.
bass line, but the bass player says, you know, I'm going to do it like this because it
Yeah.
works. And the drummer is like, well, I hear what you did on your
Hmm.
drum machine, but I'm going to interpret it like this. I'm like, and I think that's the value add. Like once you
Yeah.
start to work with people in
Hmm.
a group, then things evolve. Like you could
Yeah.
be kind of alpha and say, well, no, it's all got to be the way I wrote it.
Right.
Or you
Right.
could be more like, you know, why not like spread the wealth? It's like, yeah, if you're a bass player, I'm sure that there's things on the bass that you know, right?
Yeah.
As a bass player,
And,
now I'm not
and
gonna interfere with that. And I realize like you're probably gonna bring something to the table I didn't think of.
exactly, and give them the freedom to create and take what you already have and elevate it and have the humility enough to let people create in the space that they are best at. You know, you may be a great songwriter and you may have ideas for what that bass is supposed to sound like or what that drum pattern is supposed to sound like, but they're the drummer and they're the bass player. So give them some guidelines, but let them do them because they can take what you created and make it even better.
Yeah, it's just like the finishing thing on it. Like you think about like Motown and those great
Hmm.
like session players, like the Funk Brothers and you know, the Shuffle, Percy Shuffle was like there was people that just had like this innate capability, and they would
Yeah.
just add to people's songs. You had great songwriters like Smokey Robinson,
Yeah.
and you had you know Marvin Gaye, and like, you know really great songwriters. But
Right,
it's like
right.
players are all bringing stuff to the table. I mean, Marvin could
He
play drums, but
yeah.
he could play like he's a better singer than a drummer, but like he could
Right.
do it. So he has an idea. But I think
Yeah.
it's just like being in that world. I think it opens up your mind to the possibility. Like you said,
Mhm.
like you were involved in the album cover. So now
Yeah.
you're like when you go to do your book cover, you have an idea what you want to do. Like
Right.
so I think sometimes if you go to a label, the A&R guys will like take over and
Yeah,
it would just like
exactly.
totally like change you into something that maybe you weren't.
Mhm.
And then
Exactly.
you're kind of like, was that really what I wanted?
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Well, and that's also that was part of the challenge for us because you know we're both Caucasian MCs, and around this time it was like what was big was like 50 Cent and like Limp Bizkit on the opposite end. So you had
Yeah.
like, kind of hard New York rap, and then you had like rock rap or whatever. And we were neither of those. So when we did meet with labels, like they had these ideas of these boxes they wanted to put us
What's
in.
in that
But
box?
yeah, but it didn't really feel authentic to us. And it was a point like I cared too much about the art to
Or what
really
you want.
just totally sell my soul, and you hear about that a lot. And being that experience really shined a lot of light into how the industry works. And I'm like, I see how this happens to people. But I was so like, because everything we built, and I just wasn't ready to give all
Yeah,
that
give that
away
much.
just for
Yeah.
like or money or whatever, because none of that is guaranteed with any of that. The only thing guaranteed with that is someone else has a hand in your money and also has a big hand in their decision making over the end product.
I think that's where you try to discover yourself. Like I
Yeah.
think, because I'm in music and I do this podcast and I have some
Hmm.
side gigs as a software designer. And I
Okay.
try to bring all the disciplines together. Like so the
Yeah.
podcast is kind of a combination of a lot, the IT side, the
Hmm.
music side. And so it's this creative kind of hodgepodge and using
Yeah.
tech to do this. And so it's
Yeah.
sometimes you find things in your life and you can kind of merge them. Right.
Man.
So is that how the book came to the point where you became an author? Is like, hey, I'm gonna start to merge all these things I've learned.
Yeah, well, and even to that point, like what you're talking about, just these different talents you have, passions you have, and the merging of all that. And that's really kind of how my life is now. Like I'm not a musician or I don't write anymore, but I still work with some artists. So like I posted a few months back, like I had just like this ideal week of work. It's like I had just done some kind of big book promo, but then I was also in the studio with one of the artists that I do some marketing for. And then I got to go to like the dungeon, which is like, where Outcast and Organized Noise all started. And I'm like a huge Outcast fan. So I'm like, all this like full circle. It's like I'm doing marketing consulting. I still have some a foot into music where I can connect and still kind of be a part of it to a degree. But
Mm.
also like I have my book, which is like to me, it's my passion project, and this is my purpose project. And getting this in people's hands and promoting it and getting the feedback of the book of people just saying how this particular chapter really challenged me, and I read your book, it was really good, and I'm actually following some of the tips that you put in the book, like and the impact of that. So it's like I love when all these worlds come together. And what I like about, I mean, I've never met you before, this is the first time we're meeting, but I can tell from what you've shared and what I know about my life, it's like to be in a point where you actually, we'll call it a risk. You took that risk, and you probably had a lot of people saying, don't do music, you're not going to make any money in music, but here you are. You're still doing music, you're doing software, but I'm like, go after it. I always say, like,
Yeah,
I followed my dream and found my purpose. And like, you follow that. There's a calling there for a reason.
I think you find like the whole idea of finding your edge. Maybe
Hmm.
you can kind of define it. I think we've been talking about it,
Yeah.
but I think it's like a lot of people feel like they got to fit in the box.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
what I've always said is like the secret sauce. When I talk to any other musician, whenever I work with other people,
Hmm.
like I work with a lot of like small indie people, emerging
Hmm.
artists and stuff. It's like
Yep.
I always say, I want to hear the song that you're scared to show anybody,
Mm.
right? Because I
Yeah.
think that's the secret sauce.
Yeah.
Like you're always gonna do, to me, your best work when it's you. When it's
Right.
like you're not trying to be Jimmy Page. You're not
Exactly.
trying to be Limp Bizkit. You're not trying to be
Hmm.
somebody else, right?
Yep.
You're actually, maybe you were inspired by
Hmm.
somebody,
Sure.
but it's how you interpret that and how it comes through your voice. That
Hmm.
to me has been why I listen to music. I'm a big
Yeah.
fan. And I'm a music
Yeah.
before I was a fan before I was a musician. It's like
Hmm.
I was into the Velvet Underground. I was into like all these kind of underground bands because they were critically acclaimed, like Alex
Yeah.
Chilton and Big Star. It's like
Hmm.
nobody, nobody really knows who they are except other artists.
Right, right, right.
You know,
Like you got to
and then
be in the
yeah,
scene and like a musician to
yeah,
know
to
some of
know
those, because I don't even know the artists, some of the artists you're talking about. So I'm like,
like
but
Sun Ra,
yeah,
yeah, stuff like that. It's like stuff that's
yep,
kind of like inside knowledge. But
right,
but
right,
the idea was like those guys felt like they should do it,
hmm,
and they didn't. They weren't the Beatles. Like
yeah,
Velvet Underground wasn't the Beatles, but Lou Reed got big eventually.
yeah,
But he wasn't like the Beatles. But like people looked at that. I mean, Bowie was inspired by what Lou was doing.
Hmm.
even though it didn't sell, he
Yeah.
influenced like tons of other artists. Like the whole
Hmm.
alternative scene was like influenced by Lou. Like
Yeah.
the grunge scene was influenced by Lou. There's like so
Yeah.
many scenes were influenced by Lou Reed, even though he wasn't commercially successful at the beginning. He stayed
Hmm.
in it just because
Yeah.
he was passionate about doing it. And I always
Hmm.
felt like, yeah, because he had an edge. He's like he's a spoken word poet that happens to
Yeah.
do it. And
Right.
it's like maybe that's not what's going on, but like, he made it what's going
Yeah.
on.
Well, it's interesting that you're saying that because I was having a conversation just today, like during my lunch. I was talking to someone about music, and we were talking about how when artists first come out, like their first, like when they first, not necessarily their first album comes out, but when an artist first starts, whether it's a singer, rapper, or musician, like there's always somebody that got them to do it. Maybe you were influenced by this guitar player or this drummer or this singer or this rapper or whatever, so your sound at first kind of emulates them because that's kind of who you look up to. You may not necessarily want to emulate them, but that's
Mhm. But you
heavily
do.
influenced by you. So your first few songs that you make are going to sound very similar to those artists, but you don't want to sound like them. So you start to grow, you start to learn. And even though, like, let's say a Kendrick Lamar was your influence and that's who you started to sound like. Matter of fact, that's the example that I use. Like, if you listen to some of Kendrick Lamar's early work, he sounds kind of like Kanye. So
Mhm.
it's like his syncopation and the way like he's just the timbre
Kinda
of his voice and everything. But
in
if you
your
listen to him
subconscious.
exactly, you can tell like that was an influence, but he's grown, he's evolved. And so it's like you learn more about your skills, you learn more about what works, you learn more about crafting your own sound to it, but that is the foundation. So, just like some of the great artists that you mentioned, like look at like the stock that they produced, people that they influenced that didn't even notice. And in my to pivot a little bit, that's music, but what are we doing in life? Like,
Yeah,
who are the
yeah.
people that we're looking up to in life? Like money management, inspiration. If you work for what if you work for a bank your whole life and you enjoy that work and that's cool, like, or you're an accountant, like who are the accountants that you look up to? Like, how are
Yeah,
you
yeah.
modeling what you're doing
Modeling
after them?
Milton Friedman or something, like, you're reading, like, all these the classic economic books, and it's like,
Right.
yeah, I believe in that, like yeah,
Exactly. It's
yeah,
like
it's
finding that inspiration, like who's the best in the game, or maybe not the best, maybe in your eyes they're the best, but who
mhm,
is it that you look up to in your industry, and how can you model what you're doing after that? And honestly, I see nothing wrong with that because you're not that person. Your journey is not that
yeah,
person.
you
Your
gotta
experience
build
is
up.
not that person. Yes. And as you go on this journey, you're going to be throwing some zigs and zags along the way that are going to create your own journey. But it's like if you have that person or people that you're kind of modeling it after, it's like you're gonna find some traction in your career or the path that you're on.
Well, I think it's like if you think about an athlete, get there, like, the coach is giving them, like, the 10,000 hours of practice,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Just like any musician, that you go through your runs, you go through what was, like, there, like, every band probably gets into the Beatles just to
Right.
learn song structure, right?
Yeah.
Or gets into Motown, it's like, yeah, you get into what's there, like, the
Hmm.
standard bearers are like canons, like, if you're an
Hmm.
author, like, there's a canon
Yeah,
of
yeah.
classic literature, like different types of literature. If you want to do this type of book, you
Right.
probably should look at this guy, right?
Hmm.
You should probably look at how it's structured, what they do, and
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with getting your first like iterations
Hmm.
kind of building off of that. But I
Right.
think after you get into your 10,000 hours, like 5,000 hours in, you start to develop
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like your own thing. By the time you get to 10,000, like you've been practicing and you
Hmm.
started with some basics. You
Hmm.
started with some known things, but
Hmm.
then suddenly your personality interjects into it.
Right.
And then now it's like you. And
Yeah.
it's you put the time in, but it's like you.
Right. And now people are seeing what you're doing, and now you're that standard for them. And that
Yeah.
happens over time. And you don't even realize it because you're just you got your eyes over here. But while you're doing that, people are watching your journey and they're inspired by your journey. And it's really cool, like just how this happens. Like we're not in this world by ourselves. We're influenced by, you know, everything around us, like people, experiences, the news cycles, like so it's like, how can you take where you are now and be more conscious of what you are leaving for the people behind you? Yes, keep your eyes moving forward and have those goals and model your game or whatever after somebody or something else. But how are you changing it to make it better so that the people that come behind you, you're leaving whatever your craft is in a better place for those people.
Yeah, and it's finding your edge. Like I think it is, like you said, it's like it's honing in on that thing that you want to say. It's like I've talked to a lot of authors, and always like, what is your story?
Yeah.
Like, and what is your hook?
Hmm.
Right? How are you going to get somebody to stay in? There's just like this classic thing in literature is like there's this phrase like a baby's
Hmm.
shoes never worn, right? And
Mm.
it's kind of like taught in literature, like that line makes you get drawn in. It's like, what was it? Why was it never worn? Like, why were the
Right. Right.
shoes? And so when you create like you start to learn techniques by like masters,
Hmm.
it's like,
Hmm.
how do you get somebody to stay in your book? How do you
Yeah.
get somebody to like understand your message? To
Hmm.
like, that elevator pitch, they let them stay in the book.
Right. Right.
They makes them drawn to the book and then stay in the book.
Hmm. Yeah. Is that a question you're asking me right now, or are you speaking like
Well,
hypothetical?
it's
Because I'll tell you how
hypothetical,
I
but
do it.
it's a
Yeah.
question that
Yeah.
you can attempt to get into.
No, because you had that pause, like you're ready for me to answer. So I will answer it. No, for me, it's like, the way I get people staying in my book is providing value throughout the whole book. And like, so, I mean, just kind of diving into edge, like finding your edge is the main title. The subtitle is how to unlock your talent and purpose. But edge is an acronym, and it means eliminate distractions, discover yourself, generate goals, and enact discipline. So the
Mm,
book kind of breaks you down, or breaks down this concept over the course of the book. So it's like, and at the end of each chapter, I have like questions for reflections, like for you. They're great to journal to and really learn more about yourself and help you on your life transformation journey. But for me, with my book, is like as you go through it, you started the journey, but you're not done with the journey until you've come to the last E with enacting discipline, and you're learning
mm.
different tips on how to be more disciplined in your craft and going after your goals and everything like that. Because if you start out and you've done the work where you're eliminating distractions and you're learning about yourself, discovering yourself, and you're generating goals, yes, you're learning things along the way. But if you stop, like you're kind of cheating yourself of why you even picked up my book in the first place. So it's like
Yeah.
finish what you start. If you can't finish my book, then you're probably not primed for life transformation anyways, because the work is like, it's going to take work to do the life transformation. So finish what you start is like just a simple principle.
Yeah, it's kind of a problem today is like we're living in a kind of cliff note extreme
Yeah.
because everybody's looking at the 30-second, 90-second TikTok
Yeah.
and they want to know the 10 steps in 45 seconds, in
Right.
90 seconds. It was like you
Hmm.
want immediate gratification. And that, I come from an age where like I would read Tom Sawyer. Right. I
Hmm.
would actually read it, not read the cliff note. I'd actually go read the book,
Right.
not watch
The
a
whole
movie.
book.
Yeah,
Right. Right.
and today people want like, oh, I don't want to. I'm just gonna read the cliff notes. I'm just gonna see the
Hmm.
movie. I'm
Right.
not gonna. I'm gonna like watch a movie about Moby Dick. I'm not gonna read Moby Dick.
Right. Just tell
And
me what it's about. It's like, no,
yeah,
read the details.
yeah, because I think it's like you kind of cut yourself short,
Hmm.
because you're not really gonna get anything out of just like the quick fix. I think
Hmm.
things take time. And like being a musician, you have to
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah.
And it's like for everything. Like people don't realize like you have to have that dedication that a musician or an athlete has.
Yeah.
You have to bring that discipline to a lot of other things.
Right.
And some
Right.
people think it's like, oh, these people just went from 0 to 100. No,
No.
nobody went from 0 to 100. It's because they put
Mm-mm.
like somebody gets into your book, they got to learn what edge means. They got to learn
Yeah.
that acronym. They got to probably go through the lessons, go through
Hmm.
go through the process, and they're like, oh, if they're not getting motivated, it's like, well, they got to probably look in the mirror and say, in the looking glass, why am I not motivated? Because
Yeah.
maybe I'm not ready to read your book.
Exactly. It's like maybe it's not the book, maybe it's you. And I think that's maybe one of the hardest challenges. Like how can someone find discipline when they don't have discipline? You know,
Mm,
and I do think I'm not one of these people that believes like anybody is like damaged goods and they're not fixable. I
mhm.
think if you don't have discipline, if you weren't raised that way or don't practice different tactics to be disciplined, I think you can still find it, but you have to start small. You know what I mean? It's like if you
You have
already
to work
have
on
like,
it.
yeah, but it's like if you're already living in, if you have it just baked into you, or you've accomplished a lot and you need that discipline to accomplish something, it's a lot easier. But if you haven't, it's like, man, let's just win the day. Like, what are we doing today?
Yeah,
Let's set a goal for today, and let's do that. Like, let's not think about, let's think about next month and for a bigger plan, but let's shrink our goals down to maybe something a little more finite that we can accomplish today, because next month is not going to be attainable if you can't accomplish today. And so, like, set a goal Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, maybe Sunday you take the day off, but you have
Yeah.
to start somewhere and just make it something that is doable.
You got to have like micro planning,
Yeah.
like in software design, we
Mhm.
used to have this concept called waterfall.
Yeah.
And waterfall was like we build the whole thing. I have like 100-page thing out of everything known.
Mhm.
Where now we do agile, and
Yeah.
agile is more iterative, and like there are
Yep.
things we don't know. And if
Mhm.
we don't know it, then we don't kill ourselves. We iterate.
Yes.
And so it's kind of like a micro level. It's like I don't have to know the whole thing. There's stuff
Right.
that's not known. So I'm going to have a version 1.1,
Mm.
1.2, 1.5,
Yes.
110, And some people think it's like, well, if I don't know the whole thing, I can't even start the thing.
Hmm.
And with an agile kind of mindset, you can still start it even if you don't know the end. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's where people make the mistake.
Mm.
They try to bite it too much.
Wow. Yeah. You just said something there. Said something big, because I believe that agile mindset, not having that is what holds so many people back. Even me at times. It's like I don't want to put something out because it's not ready. It's not ready. But the truth is, my book, I still don't feel like it's ready. But it took me 10 years to write this book, and I was like, I'm putting this book out. Like, it's good
You
enough.
gotta put your foot down and
Yeah.
put it out.
Yeah, and that's not to say it's not a good book. I mean, I know I'm biased and I wrote it and I think it's a great book, but I'm really a perfectionist. Everything that I've ever put out, I've never been like, this is exactly everything that I want it to be. It's flawless. Like, there's still, even if I go back and look at some of my best music, I'm like, I would have changed the levels on
Yeah,
that
you can always
hi-hat a
change.
little bit or something,
That's why you can remaster. That's why you can do different versions.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the thing with my book, like, it's ready to go, but I can always put out a second edition.
Yeah, there's always
So
like the third edition. There's always
right,
enhanced editions or addendums.
yeah,
And that's where you can go into that mindset. It's like, yeah, I could have a version 1.1. In
right,
this world, that is acceptable. That can happen.
right,
That's and you got to at least jump on that train to realize that you don't have to be perfect. I think
mm-mm,
perfection is like the enemy of actually success, because a lot of
yeah,
times it just nips things in the bud. You
yeah,
know, I see so many people like they won't put anything out, and
right,
they've done they got like 100 demos and they're all really good, but they won't
man,
even try to put them out. And like an artist with it in a loft with all these paintings, and they never put any in the gallery
right,
because I'm looking for that right one. It's like
e
we got
exactly.
a lot of good stuff right here.
Yeah, it's that person who has that business plan, like, and right now, like, let's just talk to the listener and the viewer of this, like, if you're that person, like, take that jump. It's like, don't worry about if it's not perfect. Like, go ahead and put that song out, put that business plan out, push that website live, because at the very least, you're going to learn something. You're going to see how people respond to it. And that information is only going to help you get better at it. So if you have a business plan, it's not fully cooked and you're like, "Hey, it's not ready, or the website, you've been sitting on it for 4 months or 2 years and it's not
Mm,
ready, put that thing up. You have that song and it's like not ready, put that song out and then come back with a remix or something. Like, take an action, because you know what's happening in the meantime. There's a few things happening. One is life is passing you by. No day is guaranteed. Any of us, including us on this call, we don't know what tomorrow brings. Lord
yeah,
willing, we'll both be here and it's all good. But one of my, I don't know if I call it a fear, but I never wanted to leave anything undone. So it's like, if
mhm,
I have something that's about ready, I'd rather have it out, released to the world, instead of take that thing to the grave with me. And also, all these other people are putting out mediocre things, and your song, your website, your business is probably better than a lot of people's. And that's not to
yeah,
knock, like, every business can't be good, every song can't be good, every whatever it is cannot be good. So put it out, because these other people are able to at least monetize, or be further on their purpose, because they're living in it, because they're releasing it and they're being fearless. So it's like, be fearless, put it out,
yeah.
don't let the fear of failure hold you back.
Well, I think vulnerability is the key, because I think a lot of times as a creative person, You
Hmm.
have to get past that vulnerability fear, like, of
Yeah.
engagement, like, "Oh, they're gonna hate it," right? And,
Right.
it's like my whole idea is, like, it coming from a Buddhist perspective is, like, the law of attraction is, like, if I put it out there, yeah, there's gonna be people that hate it,
Mm-hmm.
people that don't connect to the same frequency,
Yeah.
right? And so they won't like it, but there's gonna
Hmm.
be people who it actually appeals to, that they actually feel like, "Hey, I'm in tune with that."
Right.
That I feel that. And there's other
Yes.
people say, "Well, that's discordant to me." I was like, "Well, then, okay,
Hmm.
well, that you're not in the right frequency for this, right?"
Yeah. It's
And
not
that's
for
not a
you.
bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It's like that everybody's gonna be in the same frequency, not everybody's
Hmm.
in the same key. And
Yeah.
I always talk in these terms. It's like there are people that are not, you know, catching your vibe, and there
Right.
are people that do, and you
Yeah.
won't know unless you actually put it out there.
Exactly.
So
And any level of success, you're gonna have detractors, and that's not who you're living for. That's not who you're creating for. Like, if you have like someone online or in person that just hates you and they just troll you and say something bad, we put so much emphasis onto that one or two detractors that we don't really take like gratitude for the people whose lives we are impacting. Like, we let
yeah,
one person just be like, oh, they didn't like the way I sound, or I didn't like Jeremy's shirt. It was like he had too much going on in it. Like, that's fine. Like, my shirt's not for you, but maybe my message is. And if you don't like my message, that's fine. Like, what I'm saying, I'm not, this isn't new. Like, and that's what kept me from putting the book out for years, is like, man, there's all these great people that write these, life transformation, personal development books. Like, why should I put a book out? Why am I any different? And I had to get
mhm.
over myself and just be like, my journey's different. My voice is different.
Your
And
story's different.
my
Like, you gotta
story's
go
different. People will resonate with me in a way that they won't some of these artists that I might look up to. So it's like, I might be the voice that people need, and that's cool, but some people aren't going to like my book, some people aren't going to like how I sound, what my message is, and I have peace with that. Like, I'm totally cool with that, because that's not, when you're living in purpose, like, that doesn't bother you. You just continue on, and you know what's for you and what's not for you.
Yeah, because it's like if you live in a life where you're kind of just living in a moment, and you're
Hmm.
not like just being so much anxiety about trying to connect and make it appealing to like the 100%
Right.
number. And it's like everybody's always trying to hit that, like, cat video is going to get like 4 billion views. It's
Right,
like,
right, right.
well, what, but is that really important?
Yeah.
Right? Is it say sometimes, like, okay, that got 4 billion views, and maybe what you did only got like 100 views.
Yeah.
But which 100 people saw it? Because sometimes
Right.
there were I had a situation where one
Man.
time I had a podcast I put out,
Hmm.
and it didn't have a lot of people view it, but then this Grammy award-winning producer viewed it, and then they got the interview with them.
Wow,
So
that's
the
awesome.
number of views did
Man.
not
Yeah.
correspond to the opportunity by creating that episode.
Yes.
So that's
Yeah.
what some people don't correlate, that sometimes the numbers don't match the opportunity.
I would take quality over quantity any day. Like, I'd rather have like 300 really devoted, I don't even want to say fans, like followers that really need my message, than having like 100,000 people who like my page that don't really care. Like, I'm about impact. And
Yeah,
to me, it's like, at the end of the day, if you're living your life based on if people are going to like it or not, like, you have to put things into perspective. If they see your song, see your post on social media, read your book, they're not going to bed thinking about you. Like, they got their own problems. They got, a job to go to. They've got family situations. They've got dreams, goals, hopes, whatever. You're not really on their mind. They're not thinking about you. So, I know it sounds cliche, but like, self-love is like so crucial. It's like, man, you got to be okay with yourself and
that's the
know that
main
there's
thing.
going to be haters out there, and your happiness is not going to be contingent on complete strangers. First of all, complete strangers that throw shade or troll, like, man, that is nothing. Like, that's them. That's like the misery that they have. If it's friends and family, it's a little bit harder. But you also have to understand, even your friends and family, man, they're struggling with things here and there, and they've
Yeah,
got issues in their life. You have issues in your life. I have issues in my life. But I'm not going to bed like things that I don't like or agree with online, or what someone said or did. That's not keeping me awake at night. So you just got to be okay with yourself and love yourself and appreciate who you are and recognize what's for you, and what's not for you. And it really clears things up about what you say yes and what you say no to. And when you're clear on that, you have so much focus and gratitude for the life that you're living every day.
Yeah, because I mean, if you get beyond like imposter syndrome, if you
Hmm.
get to the point where that self-love,
Yeah.
and there's some people it's like, whoa, they're being I run into people, it's like, why are they so arrogant? Why do they feel they can do that? It's like it's not
Hmm.
arrogance. It's like they feel good
Hmm.
about where they are, or
Yeah.
or maybe they don't feel good about where they are, but they've come to terms about where they are, and they're
Yeah.
able to tell their story, and it makes them want to move forward, right? So if
Yeah.
somebody is on a path, whether it's it could still be choppy, but they're willing to take the steps and go forward,
Yes.
and not everything's going to be rose smelling up like roses, right?
Hmm.
Like sometimes there's like you can't be a good ship captain if you never gone through a storm.
Right.
Like, I don't know if I want to be on that ship if you've never had to deal with a storm. I probably don't want to be on
Yeah.
it.
Right. I mean, it's that's the piece that doesn't when you look at people in your life who are successful, and even yourself, like I consider you successful. Consider if you're alive today in this year and this month and this day and you're breathing, you're successful. So let's reframe what success looks like. um Success, well, let's just say life, because take success off the table. Life, it doesn't matter. Like, if you feel like some people got the easiest, the richest people got problems that I don't even want to be concerned with, and a lot of people aren't happy. There's people with no money that are very content. Money is not the key to happiness. Success is always going to come with ups and downs. Like, I've been through a lot of my life. I've been through a lot of loss and uncertainty and really difficult seasons of my life, as I'm sure you have too. And we don't talk enough about that, which is why I like podcasting and your platform here, because you do get to have some real conversations, and we don't just get to say, hey, I'm a 2-time best-selling author. Like, that's great, that's awesome, I'm very proud of that. But it's like, man, if you read my book and see some of the mess that had to go on, like, you may not want to walk in my shoes. There's people I look up to, and when I read their story, it's like, I don't know if I want to do that. I'm happy being me, and I'm happy for my journey. And be content with your journey, and know that that if you're going through a storm in life now, like, it's just that, like, it will pass, and you're going to look back and see the resilience that you've built as a result of that.
Now, this concept of the 5 forces of balance, is that,
Yeah.
like, something you can kinda dive into?
Sure. Yeah. So early in the book, I talk about the 5 forces of balance. And this is like when you look at family, your professional life, your health life, your spiritual life, and your personal life. And one thing, and I mean, I think this might be in the book, but one thing that I challenge folks in some of my training is like rating yourself on these, like on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being bad, 5 being good, or you could do a scale of 1 to 10, whatever. Like looking at your family life. And this could be whether you are in a relationship, whether you're married, single, whether you have kids or not, whatever that family life looks like. It could be relationship with your siblings or grandparents or whatever, but how would you rate your family life? Your professional life, how would you rate that? What's the quality of your professional life? Are you a workaholic? And so you're like, maybe a 1 or 2, but maybe you love your work and you are a workaholic. So maybe you're at a 3 or 4. But what it does is it brings awareness to these different, I mean, to me, I call them the 5 forces of balance, because they're 5 areas of your life that are really important to having balance and living a life of joy and purpose. So the next one, looking at health, like what's the picture of your health? Like, are you eating right? Are you working out? Are you moving? Like, what are you doing to take care of yourself every day? Your spiritual life, I do believe spirituality is important. And I don't like, I'm a Christian, but I'm not forcing Christian values onto people. To me, like, what's important is like, how are you connecting with a creator or a spiritual being higher than yourself? Because there's principles in different religions that provide a sense of just being grounded and
Mm.
gratitude and respect for other people and respect for yourself. And I think that's super important. And then just looking at your personal life, these are like the things that are important to you, like your hobbies and I love to travel. So it's like, that's important to me. Like your finances, that's a part of your personal life. So how are we doing in our finances? So kind of rating yourself on each of these different 5 forces, and then setting goals for each one of these. Like if I'm at a 4 in my family, and it's on a scale of 1 to 5, like what will it take me to get to a 5? If I'm at a 3 in health, like how can I get to a 4? I mean, the goal isn't necessarily you're getting 5s in all of them. Like I think that may not be attainable, but just being aware of these different forces in your life and being able to manage each of these, and bring awareness and goals to each of these, you're going to find that you live your life with a little bit more intent to have overall balance in your life, which actually opens you up to where you can walk that path of purpose like more succinctly.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of pillars to life, and I think
Hmm.
sometimes people get a little out of balance,
Hmm.
or they'll focus. Like I run into it. I talked to a guy that was like a trainer,
Hmm.
and he came to realize, like, even though he had six pack abs and he looked perfect, his
Yeah.
mental health wasn't there.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
his outer body looked perfect, but his
Yes.
mental fitness wasn't there. Right?
Right.
He looked in the mirror and he did not see what other people saw.
Yeah.
He didn't see the six pack abs.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
sometimes people make a mistake of thinking, oh, like he must be living on top of the world because he's got this great body and it's better than my body. So then they're like, he must be happy, but he wasn't. And so
Yeah.
that kind of shows you, like, if you can have like whatever the pillars are in your life, you got to have a kind of a understanding. Like, are you out of balance? Are you not,
Yeah.
like, you know, being your full self? And I think
Yeah.
some people get stuck in like one aspect and put too much into it,
Yeah.
and they go to the extremes, and then they wonder why. Well, your body's not gonna your whole
Mm.
self is not gonna do well if you're at extremes.
Right.
Then you're gonna kinda be kinda all over the place.
Exactly. Well, and then just doing like check-ins, because even like with these 5 forces, it's like I typically do this like at the beginning of the year, kind of like a New Year's resolution. But I'm looking at these 5 forces and I'm creating goals for each of these. And I've got to a point now where it stays on my mind quite a bit, so I don't necessarily need reminders. But when you're starting like this life transformational kind of work, putting check-ins on your calendar. So when I first started doing this, like every quarter, I'd put like
Mm.
a calendar invite to
Oh, that's
myself
cool.
to check in and rate these 5 forces of balance. Because even to your point, if you're like a bodybuilder and you're looking great, and maybe emotionally, psychologically, you've fallen apart, like this is that reminder to check back in with yourself. And if you need to get counseling, need to get help somehow, like it's the awareness is everything. Because if you get in this mode where it's go, 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 lift, 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 or work, 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 whatever it is, you need that little pause and that little reminder to bring that awareness back to everything, because you're going to run yourself ragged and you're not going to find the happiness. And, quite honestly, you could be playing with the duration of your life if you're going too far in on one
Yeah.
force and ignoring the others.
Yeah, sometimes what I find is, like, a lot of people, you need like a little timeout, or you need like
Hmm.
breathing space, or you need to take that walk in the woods.
Yeah.
Because a
Yeah.
lot of people forget, like, they get on this train and they're
Hmm.
thinking like, "Oh, I gotta put in 120%," and
Right.
then they burn out. And then they
Yeah.
wonder, like, if you can kinda pre-plan, like
Hmm.
that, like your tour manager wants you to go boom, 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 city, city, city. It's like,
Hmm.
okay, is that really healthy for me? Is that
Yeah.
really the right thing to do? Can we space it out? Do we have to do it that way? You
Hmm.
know, do we have to go and spend like 12 hours in the studio?
Right.
It's like, 'cause
Right.
eventually you have diminishing returns,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And maybe
I've
it's not
seen that.
hip to do 99 takes. Maybe you should walk away and come back. Like,
Yeah.
maybe, like, it's the 3rd take that's better on the
Right.
next day
Yep.
than the 102nd take on the same day.
Man. Yeah. I mean, I call it the power of the pause, because there is power in the pause. And the pause could be coming back the next day. A pause could be like, I'm going away for the weekend. Just whatever this wheel is that we're on, just stepping off that wheel and just letting the wheel keep moving without you, and getting yourself together and coming back in. Like there's so much power in that. And I don't want to speak for you, but I can speak for myself. Whenever I've done that, whenever I hit pause, I've always come back with fresh ideas. I've even
Mm,
like scrapped ideas that I thought were good, but now that I had a chance to sit back and just pause for a minute, I'm like, I'm taking that idea off the table, and this is where I
yeah.
need to focus. So it's really
Yeah,
powerful.
yeah, sometimes you gotta walk away because like, you're in the
Yeah.
middle of it, like and even in software, we find it all the time. It's like, I tell some if you're working with programmers, it's like, "Hey, just hammering at it." Yeah, like, you're missing something, like, what that's why we have code reviews, we have other
Yeah.
people look at it, but sometimes
Hmm.
you have to stop, and
Yeah.
because like, you get so tied into it that you don't see the big picture. All you
Right.
see is your part, and
Yeah.
sometimes you gotta walk away and get the 50,000-foot view,
Hmm.
you know, or have other people look at it, or just, like, say, "Hey, it's not." It's like, I'm too engaged on this, I need to, like, back out a little
Yeah.
bit, get
Hmm.
some perspective, and
Exactly.
and I think it's just, it's important because, like, in your life, sometimes you gotta take that 50,000-foot view of your life because
Hmm.
you might be narrowly focused on, like, one thing
Yeah.
or 2 things, right? But you're not looking at the big picture.
Yeah. And if you need to schedule it, then schedule it. It's like if you're looking at your week, you've had a busy week, like block out your calendar on a day and time and be like, from this time, like I'm literally like out of the office. I might be in the room next door, but I'm like, I've got to disconnect. And sometimes if we don't schedule things, they don't get done. So sometimes you got to schedule the pause. But there's so much
Yeah,
value to
personal
doing
health
that.
day. Yeah, because
Got to,
sometimes
man.
you get these guys that got, like, 5 weeks of vacation, they don't take it. It's like,
Right.
okay,
That's
you need a
crazy.
you need a personal health day because you're making the
Yes.
team you're driving the team crazy
Yeah, yeah.
because
Please take a day off.
you're too freaking like, you need to take it for the team needs a day off from you.
Exactly.
It's like
Oh,
it's
man.
like, forget about it. It's like you're a critical person dependency.
Right.
But
Yes, yes.
we need to take a break from you.
Right, right. Sometimes, hey, that's truth. Snaps.
'Cause that's a little much, but,
Yeah,
yeah, I think people are doing a little too much, but, I think it's important, like, because you feel the work you're doing is important because that's, like,
yeah.
the passion people get into, what I love about
Mhm,
people who are, creative and have a vision.
mhm.
It's like you like to hear what they have to say. It's like this
Yeah,
podcast is like a master class in listening to other people's opinions and other
mhm.
people's way of life.
Yeah,
And, regardless, I've, been doing this a long time. It's like I feel like every hour I talk to somebody,
mhm,
I'm just getting all this knowledge.
mhm.
It's like I'm taking like a course
Yeah,
in life.
yeah. Well, and you're talking directly to the source. You're not watching a YouTube video or a blog. Like it's interaction. It's connection. We are connecting. I'm learning about you. Your audience is learning about us. But it's like it's a gift. This is a gift. So I appreciate the platform that you have and just connecting because it works both ways. Like I learn from you, you learn from me. We don't have all the answers, but when we get off of this podcast, we're gonna walk away with something.
Now, like, how do you, tell somebody that's going through like a difficult part of their life and what, like, how to start to maybe you know, not try to take it all at once, but
Yeah.
like give them some difficult advice to like handle that difficult situation. Can you kind of make it more simplified?
Yeah, I mean, because that's 100% chance of happening in life. There's going to be difficult situations, whether it's loss of a job, loss of a person, loss of a loved one, could be a bad health diagnosis or something like that. Some bad news. I mean, there's a lot of different seasons that we're going to go through, and for me, like what I've learned, and it may sound trite to say, but it's just like just stay in there because one thing I really believe is we are tested and we will go through things in life for sure. But what do we learn about that? What do we learn about ourselves? And don't give up because yes, it's hard now. Like I've conquered some pretty overwhelming obstacles in my life, and I look back at it and I have so much gratitude for the the obstacles that I have done because it's made me who I am. It's built resilience. It's built confidence. Like I look back at who I was and how scared I was at the time that, I faced hardships and you might be right now scared to death of what's happening in your life. but just hang in there, because there is an other side to this. There is the backside of this where it's behind you, and that tenacity you build, the story that you have of overcoming that, can actually be a testimony to help somebody else out that really needs to hear your voice. And you can't save that person if you're not going through this process right now, as bad as it seems. And you may say, I don't want this, please remove this from my life, but it's not removed because you're alive and you're going through it. So you are alive, you're here for a reason, and you are the gift. So, just buckle down and ride through this storm and learn from that.
I think it's real important for people to realize, like, you're gonna go through those difficult times,
Hmm.
in life. Like in my life, I've gone through. I'm a cancer survivor,
Awesome.
and
Yeah.
and it's like if I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't do what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
sometimes there's certain things you go through
Yeah.
that you could look at as like, why did that happen to me? And when 27-year-old me is like, why? But
Yeah.
then you figure it out, it's like, oh, what can I do with that?
Yes.
And when you figure out what you're gonna do with it, then you can kind of pass it on, and then
Hmm.
other people can realize, like, there's a lot of things you can do with the
Yeah.
fact that you're waking up the next day and
Hmm.
and you're still here.
Man.
There's a lot you can do with that. You can work with that.
Well, and looking at yourself like, I'm a liability because this happened to me, or I've got this stain because of this thing happened in my past. But I'm like, man, use that liability as your strength. Like, lean into that. Like,
Yeah, that's
you're a
true.
cancer survivor. If you're like, I had cancer, and you downplayed it, but it's like, man, that's huge, because that's not everybody's story. And you're here. So you're a voice of hope as well. So it's like, you go through things and we perceive them as liabilities, but like, man, that is can be your biggest strength, and life transformational as it has been for you. So you just
Yeah,
don't
you
know what
think
that's
that.
gonna do. It's gonna
Yeah,
keep
you
there's
think
life before this happens, and then life after it happens. And it's two very different lives.
well, you can be a teacher, you can be a coach, you can be like a mentor. Like
Yeah.
you take the thing that happened that you're kind of maybe you're embarrassed about or you
Hmm.
didn't feel good about, but
Yeah.
like you said, you can make that thing that was a perceived liability, you make it
Hmm.
the strength.
Yep.
And I think that's how you overcome things. And I think
Yeah.
it's it's hard to go through, and it's like everybody goes through it their own way. But
Hmm.
I think once you realize that not everything has to be like a smell of roses to be useful.
Hmm.
Sometimes the
Exactly.
thorns are very useful.
Man, very true, man. Yeah, life is not Instagram where it's just the highlight reel. It comes with
Yeah,
all
yeah.
the ugly with it as well.
Well, I want to make sure that you have time for your next appointment, but
Cool.
I didn't mention the Amazon before. I think I mentioned one time, but people can click on that.
Okay.
It's kind of long. I can't really say the whole thing, but
Yeah.
once people get into the description of the podcast, and we're live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch,
Hmm.
once we're off the air, that link is clickable in the
Okay.
description of the podcast, and everywhere the podcast is going to be, which will be on multiple platforms by tomorrow. You'll be
Yeah.
able to click through that, and that'll
Okay.
bring you right to the book, right?
Yeah, that goes right to the book on Amazon. It's also on like Kindle, Audible, and Apple Books. So if you want the
Oh,
audio version, audio book, then you have that as well. And definitely like reach out to me. You can link up with me on LinkedIn, Jeremy Hazelwood, or on Instagram. Jeremy.Hazelwood is my handle on Instagram. So
that's awesome.
yeah. So thank you for your time today. I appreciate the conversation. This has been awesome.
Well, I love to talk to people. It's kind of my thing here.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate you being a guest on the Family Electric Ghost podcast. Again, like I said, we'll be on all the podcast platforms where you can listen to or watch a podcast by tomorrow. And check us out on Facebook or YouTube right now. And I'll
Okay.
talk to you in the future when you have another book.
Yeah. Sounds good. Thank you.
Have a good night.
All right. Take care. Bye.